Okay, well, welcome to Technically's first Pittsburgh podcast. I'm Alice Crow. I'm the Pittsburgh lead reporter for Technically, and in case you're not familiar with us, we launched in Pittsburgh back in early 2020. We're building on 15 years of experience covering innovation across different regions. Technically covers the intersection of entrepreneurship, tech careers, and economic opportunity for aspiring and established technologists. Basically, we cover anything that spurs innovation in the ecosystem. If you're not already, make sure to sign up for our weekly Pittsburgh newsletter at technically/subscribe and check out the other stories on our website. Our mission is to make news accessible for everyone, so our work is completely free. There's no paywall. So now let's get into it. Today I'm with co-founder and CEO of the North Shore-based sports tech company Diamond Kinetics, CJ Handren. Welcome. Founded in 2014, the company is known for the DK bat sensor, which attaches to any bat and delivers swing data to the Diamond Kinetics app. Last year, the company raised $6.9 million and is currently the trusted youth development platform of the Major League Baseball. CJ, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah. I guess just to start off, can you walk us through the origin story of Diamond Kinetics? What was the driving force behind starting the company?
Yeah, the origin story is a fun one, especially in Pittsburgh and being in Oakland today, because it's a University of Pittsburgh founding story. So I ran a program at Pitt called Panther Lab Works, which focused on working with students and faculty who were working on new technology ideas and concepts. And the goal really of that program was to help develop early plans and help figure out how do we get this out of the university, start to commercialize in Pittsburgh. So I'm a lifelong baseball player and fan. Did not think that was going to, my love of baseball was going to cross up with any technology opportunity, but in walks Dr. Buddy Clark from the Swanson Engineering School at the University of Pittsburgh, working on inertial sensors and being able to track and measure around in particular baseball, because he was also a baseball dad and a baseball coach. And so that led us to really start to think about what are the opportunities commercially. For the first time, this was accessible, mobile device driven, wireless, and cost effective. And so for us, we felt like there's 15 million kids that play baseball and softball. This was an opportunity to bring a technology and tools and data and information to them in a way to help them get better at baseball and hopefully have some fun doing it along the way.
Yeah. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about how your personal connection to baseball help shape the company's vision, especially at the start.
Yeah, I think one of the things that helped me the most was that instantly, as soon as he showed me what at the time was a pretty raw demo of what the possibility was, I could quickly connect with it, because as someone who played and paid a lot of attention to the game and still had a lot of relationships and connections from folks that I had played with through high school that were involved in baseball, I pretty quickly felt like, if this is what I think it is that I'm looking at, it has a chance to be really impactful. Because if you think about, and now it's a different world. 10 years later, there's technology all through sports. Every level of sports, everything is being measured.
Yeah.
There's technology to help us at every level, sensors, videos, instructional. But at that time there wasn't. And so we relied a lot on just like visual feedback, and a baseball swing happens in 0.2 of a second. And so, there's only so much you can actually see with all of that. So I started picking the phone up and calling people that I still, knew, were in and around the game and coaching. We kind of helped Dr. Clark get out of the building and started talking to people in the industry and around the game, and that reaction we were getting was really interesting, and we used that as a signal. And for me, it was a signal to say, hey, I think there's really something here, and decided I wanted to kind of take the plunge and co-found the company with him and kind of leave my role at Pitt to go out and try to build business around it.
And how has the bat sensor developed over time? Because you're saying you started during an era where sports tech was not as popular as it is today.
Yeah. It's funny to look back on that, because even what we started with as sensors is now so much so much more broad as a company from a technology platform perspective. And so what started as sensors has moved into computer vision for us. We acquired a live streaming video company last year. And so, our mission has gotten much more broad, which is how do we build a technology platform that, kind of serves not just the athlete, but the entire family, around youth sports. And so whether that's live streaming a game, whether it's highlights, whether it's instruction data, getting better at baseball. So the sensors themselves are on their now 4th generation. They've gotten smaller and faster and more cost effective. And most interestingly for us now, they're actually going inside the equipment. And so we now have permanently embedded Diamond Kinetics sensors in bats with major bat manufacturers. We kind of think that's the next frontier of the sensors, where they don't have to charge. There's no lights on them. They just kind of work magically in the background, and they're part of your equipment. So I think that's been one of our big goals is, our CTO talks about all the time. We got to get the tech out of the way, right? And we're entering a phase, I think, as a company and as an industry where, the tech was in the way a lot, but early adopters are willing to push through that. As you get into a more mainstream adoption phase, there's an expectation for all of us as consumers and users of technology that all the kinks have been ironed out and it's not going to be incredibly hard to use. And so we're trying to kind of move more and more in the background where things just feel like they're magically happening.
And when did that shift between, okay, we've got this technology to we want to be a technology platform? Where do you remember if there was a specific moment?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago as a company, we're fortunate to have a really strong group of investors and board around us. We really started talking about, okay, what is the long form of our company and our strategy look like? And as the industry was kind of taking shape, and there were some companies that came and went. There was companies that were beginning to establish pretty good footing. We felt like we've built a good footing in a particular part of the market, specifically thinking with athlete development and kind of training in mind. But we also felt like that's only part of the life of an athlete. My kids are now 15 and 12, and so kind of grown up through, youth sports and athlete development. And we felt like, hey, we want to have an opportunity to be involved in the on-field activity as well. And so sensors going in bats and smart bats is part of that, but we also saw the emergence of video and live streaming and what can be done with that content and with those highlights. And so 3 or 4 years ago, we started to put in motion, hey, we have an opportunity, I think, to evolve into something, more than sensors for training, which we built a good company and good footing in, but saw an opportunity to be something a little more broad.
Yeah. In 2022, you became the trusted youth development partner of Major League Baseball, which is a huge milestone. How did that partnership come together, and what advice would you give to other companies looking to land big partnerships in their own industries?
It came together over a lot of years, and I think that's kind of one of the elements of that story is that it takes some time to really build relationships. We had a lot of conviction that we wanted to try to do something thoughtful and strategic with Major League Baseball, and I think sometimes that's building a relationship, proving yourself, and so kind of we kind of proved ourselves out, I think, in the market and the relationships we had built with other organizations, USA Baseball, USA Softball, larger youth organizations and governing bodies, and I think that sometimes then you also just sort of need to catch the timing right. And so I think Major League Baseball was also beginning to put more focus and emphasis on what their youth strategies are. How do they engage this generation of players? I mentioned my kids' age, right? They're digital natives, and so they consume baseball content, sports content in a very, very different way than I did when I was a kid. And so I think Major League Baseball, recognizes that. And one of the things that they have, decided to get behind and work with on is a technology like ours, which is a platform to be able to bring, Major League on-field content, big leaguers, and those experiences to kids in very unique ways. And in particular for us, our big difference there is we're not just serving, it's not just another content platform to serve kids short form video or so, it's very active play based, right? So almost everything you do in our environment, you have a bat in your hands, you're doing something active, kind of participating in gameplay.
Yeah. And so it sounds like I've heard this saying before, every opportunity is a little bit of luck, but you have to be ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of like, relationship building, leveraging the relationships that you can build separate from that partnership. So in our case, we have great investment partners in Elysian Park Ventures, TNC Ventures, 76 Capital, all organizations with strong, deep relationships in baseball and in sports. And so that adds credibility. It adds the ability to have another voice trying to kind of open doors up. And I think in our case, like the fact that we are almost entirely focused on baseball and softball is a real benefit in trying to build a relationship with Major League Baseball, whose only focus is baseball, versus us being a broad multi-sport platform where you almost are trying to replicate that different organizations, different professional organizations. And so for us, we're able to just stay very, very focused on, this is the sport we're trying to be best at. We're trying to deliver as much value as we can. And I think for Major League Baseball, they felt like, you want to partner with somebody who's like, 24/7, 365, thinking about the thing that you care about the most.
Definitely. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced early on as a sports tech company? And I mean, obviously, you're saying the game has changed now a lot. So what advice would you give to sports tech companies, a startup right now?
I think we ran into a lot of the same challenges that a lot of early stage companies run into, no matter what your kind of domain or industry is. There's technical hurdles, right? So everything looks easier on a whiteboard and on paper than when you start building that. And so, the one I smile about the most is the first version of this. We thought it would be pretty easy. Just the hard part was going to be the sensor. It would be easy to figure out how do you attach that to the end of the bat. It took 19 iterations of different straps and mechanisms to be able to get it to actually stay on the knob of a bat. And then we realized how different all the different bat knobs are. And so it's little things like that you realize this iterative process of product iteration and development is hard, right? And you're balancing that against minimal resources, speed, pace, competition, all of that other stuff. And so we dealt with that. And then I think we underestimated, as probably most entrepreneurial companies do, but certainly I think most in sports did, which is there's a learning curve and an adoption curve, especially when you're bringing, and in our case, bringing data to people for the first time that nobody ever had. We were showing up to, Major League Baseball spring training camps, and no one had been able to measure this. It wasn't the kind of thing. It was just, hey, it's a better mousetrap, or it's a cheaper mousetrap. It just wasn't data that was available. And so, I think we thought we'd just be able to provide the data, and people would quickly be able to understand. Oh, I know what I'm going to do with this, and this is what this means. And that took a lot longer than we thought. And I think we're at a point now where there's pretty broad adoption of motion data in sort of all sports and at most all levels at this point. We like to think we did our own little part in kind of helping create that. But both of those took, the old adage of, I used to give this advice to folks when I was at Panther Labworks, which was, it's going to take twice as long and cost twice as much. And then somehow when we started our own thing, I thought it would be different for us, and it cost at least twice as much and definitely twice as long.
Yeah,
so.
That's great. Yeah, that's funny. You stayed rooted in Pittsburgh since the company started. What aspects of the city have helped Diamond Kinetics grow, and why has it remained the right place for your headquarters?
I've said this in the past. I think it's the only city we could have started this company in at that time. When we started this, we really were on the front edge of sports tech companies, especially ones that were thinking with kind of consumers and scale in mind. And this city and its affinity for sports and the technical capabilities coming out of both Pitt and Carnegie Mellon gave us an opportunity to actually find early investors and get people that were interested in what we were doing. Whereas I think if we were in one of the larger tech ecosystems, I would have had a much harder time jumping up and down high enough and loud enough to get people to pay attention to what we're doing, especially at a point where people were really skeptical about sports technology. That there were not venture funds that were focused exclusively on sports tech companies, and there were not, accelerators for sports tech companies. And now they're everywhere, and that's great. But I think Pittsburgh has this perfect recipe for us of talent, interest in sports, and just generally a very, very supportive early stage technology ecosystem. And so we've broadened as a company now. We probably have 40% of our team is not in Pittsburgh, and we are a kind of hybridized in Pittsburgh and remote team. And I would say that COVID induced a willingness to have fully remote employees, and we've embraced that, and it has opened up talent opportunities for us in some areas. But Pittsburgh it's cost effective, it's sports oriented, tremendous talent coming out of the universities, and so it's been a great fit for us.
Yeah. And what's next for Diamond Kinetics? What can you say? What's the vision, the trajectory that you're hoping to see in the next couple of years?
Yeah, we have a lot of work left to do in baseball and softball. I think we're entering a stage here where there's an opportunity in that sort of typical adoption curve in all parts of our platform. It all feels like it's entering into that like more broad mainstream phase. And so we have a lot of work to kind of be able to continue to add value and add to what we provide to the folks that use those products. We're really excited about what's happening in live streaming and in video. We have tens of thousands of teams now that stream their games, using our platform, and we're really interested in how both elements, what we do from a data and tracking and kind of athlete performance perspective, how that starts to converge with video and what happens on the field when you're in a game. You can imagine that the more we know about what's happening in game performance, and if you keep hitting ground balls to third base, and we know that, we can use that information to more thoughtfully personalize what you're doing at home and how we provide guidance and feedback. So we have a lot that we want to do there. We're starting to see opportunities in other sports, and so to this point, we've been a baseball and softball company. The acquisition of Sideline HD brought other sports to us, so we've seen tremendous growth in volleyball and basketball from a live streaming perspective. And so I think we have some work to do to decide like what's our longer form strategy in those areas. But we're excited about the opportunities and the growth, and so we're still very much oriented towards being a baseball and softball centric company. But we're starting to think about and explore what does expansion look like to be more of a youth sports company versus simply just a baseball and softball company.
Yeah. Is there a particular story that comes to mind where you really saw the impact of your work firsthand? Something where, this is truly why I started this company, when you saw it?
For me, it's there's a couple of things that come to mind. One was early, and this really actually wasn't the reason that we built the technology, right? Our root purpose in doing this was we believe that in baseball and softball in particular, the skills are very difficult to learn. I'm biased towards the fact that I would sit and say that it's the hardest sport to learn to play. I've now coached a bunch of kids from 7 years old, and that has only confirmed for me that it's a really hard sport. And the skills are hard to hit a ball coming at you. And so our view was, if we can make an impact to help kids develop those skills faster, have those first moments on a field, the first time you get a hit, the first time something happens that gets you so excited about the game, that's our primary goal. But in the early days of this, especially in more advanced levels of the game, there was a lot of interest in, if I can measure this, how can I use it for scouting and recruiting and player evaluation? And so I remember after this, maybe the second year we had the company, we had one of the major league teams that we were working with at the time, send me an email and just say, hey, thought you'd like to know, we drafted somebody this year solely because of the data we collected from your product, which at one hand I was like, wow, that's amazing. And on the other hand, I had this like anxiety of like, wow, that's like a lot to shoulder here, that like you made a big decision like that. So that was one. And then I think the first times that I actually got to go to baseball fields, like in my own community, and I'd walk around and I saw a bat with like my product on the end of it, and a kid that I don't know, who's just walking by, I was like, huh.
That's crazy.
Using our product. Those are little moments, I think, as an entrepreneur, you're kind of like, we've built something now that, now it's something that hundreds of thousands of people have used. And like, I look sometimes at the numbers, I'm like, this is pretty wild that we started tinkering with this in a conference room at University of Pittsburgh. And now it's something that has been used, tens of millions of times by hundreds of thousands of people. So it's pretty neat. Yeah,
it's amazing. Wow. I guess to just wrap things up kind of on a fun note, the MLB's 2025 season just kicked off. What are you most excited to see this season?
I'm just a huge baseball fan. Like it's funny, my fandom has evolved. I grew up as a Mets fan, like, I'm born in New York, and then, but now, like, building this company, like, I'm a fan of a lot of teams, especially the ones that, like, we're involved with in different ways. And so I just love watching baseball. I think the game got better last year in the rules changes that they made. The pace of the game is better. I think that there is a crop of young, talented superstar players that MLB hasn't had quite at this volume in as long as I can remember, at least last decade or so, where you have a tremendous amount of energy. And so it's just a fun game to watch right now with all the young talent, young superstars, really. The pace of the game improving and just a lot of energy around it. So I find myself, we laughed last week or week before last in our office, and it's like MLB opening day feels like it should be like a holiday, national holiday kind of thing. So everybody's walking around saying happy opening day because it just feels exciting. Every team's 0-0 at that point. Everybody, no matter who you cheer for, you got a lot of energy. And so just a big fan of the game and excited to kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, great. Well, CJ, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Enjoyed
definitely.
it.